Hi, this is Sari. Um, just watched a documentary that was so bizarre. It's called Abducted in Plain Sight. So if you haven't seen it on Netflix, I don't want to give you any spoilers. Spoiler alert, just go and watch it. If you've already seen it and want to hear my thoughts and maybe add some comments at the end, feel free. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about it right now. So it was actually done by filmmaker Sky Borgman. It is jaw-droppingly bizarre. I mean, really bizarre. It was originally released in 2017 and Netflix picked it up again and is now airing it in 2019. And it has like an entire new audience. It's garnered an entire new audience. It is really, really unbelievable. It's a story of a sexual predator and his total manipulation of a married couple and their 12-year-old daughter. It is so strange that during viewing this, there's a car scene with the two fathers. I had to pause the actual video and Google it and make sure that it was really true because I thought it was like a mockumentary. I didn't think it was truly a documentary. Now, I do detest victim bashing. I don't condone it. So some might find that what I say about her parents might consider that victim bashing. I don't feel it is. But you'd let me know what you think after I'm done. All right, so now, by the way, Jan, the victim in this case, was the 12-year-old girl at the time, but she certainly has persevered and is currently a successful actress with an impressive resume. She has 30 episodes of Everwood. She's on that TV show on the WB right now, and a score of other films. She's been in like 45 other movies. She's a beautiful, talented actress now. All right, so anyway, the story centers around the Broberg family, and the parents are Bob and Mary Ann, and their three daughters. And it's Jan, who's 12, and then she has a little sister, Karen, and then the baby is Susan. And they live in Pocatello, Idaho. And they were members of the LDS Church, or the Mormon Church, Church of the Latter-day Saints. And then there's a new family that moves in town, and that is Bob Berchtold and his wife Deanna, who goes by the name of Gail, and they're 5 kids. They have 4 boys and a little girl. So the families got really close, the Berchtolds and the Brobergs. The Brobergs, that's Jan and her parents and sisters. And so at some point, Berchtold, the predator, was nicknamed B, just the letter B. And he actually drove both families of kids to school every morning. Jan's dad, Bob, was a florist at the time. Now everybody was really aware of the special attention that B showered on Jan, and he nicknamed her his Dolly. He actually recited a poem that he recorded on a tape cassette. It is super creepy, and it goes as follows. A splattering of clouds were set afire by the rays of the southern sun. I looked at Dolly, her face aglow. She reached out and took my hand and then said, "I love you." I returned, "I love you too, beautiful." I turned to her, put my arms around her and pulled her close to me and said, "Dolly, you've got a special light into my life. I love you more than words can tell." She looked up at me and bent over, and then we kissed. No man could ever love a woman more. This is really disgusting. He's 30 and she's 12. So B started to romance Jan's mother as well. Jan's mother's name was Mary Ann. And Mary Ann apparently wasn't getting a lot of attention from her husband, Bob, the florist. So B would call her during the day and at lunchtime, and he'd say, "Oh, come down to the store and, we can talk and whatever." So she would come down there and he would compliment her on how beautiful she was and showed her all kinds of attention that she wasn't getting from her florist husband, Bob, at home. And one thing led to another, and she was very enamored and excited by all of his attention, and they started a hot and heavy sexual relationship. Um, and that lasted quite a while. Now, of course, this was all done behind Bob, her husband's back, and Bee's wife, Gail's back. They knew nothing about this. Um, so, but Bee was not done with his sexual manipulation. He wasn't done with his uh, courting, as you'd say. So he decides that he thinks Bob, Jan's dad, might be a closet homosexual. So he decides to ensnare him as well in a sexual relationship. So he takes Bob out for a ride one afternoon, and he pulls the car over after they've driven for a while, and they get out to a desolate area. And he told Bob, he just can't stand his wife. Oh, I just can't stand Gail. And I need some relief. And so Bob looks over and notices that Bee is sexually aroused. And he has his genitalia out. And so, Bob does what any guy would do in that case. I mean, who wouldn't do this? He reaches over and, in his own words, he says, oh, I relieved him, through the act of sexual masturbation. Who wouldn't do that? So, of course, neither Marianne nor Bob knew that they were having a relationship with Bob, and Bob's wife, Gail, didn't know either. And this is really the reason that neither parent was vigilant in protecting their daughter, Jan, the 12-year-old, who was being sexually molested and manipulated by this grown-ass man. So anyway, Bob denied that he was a homosexual until, no, he never admitted it, but he died in 2018. Still said he wasn't. And some people said that the reason that they didn't protect Jan was because they were really naive. They were Mormon. There was no internet. They didn't know anything about sexual predators or child molesters. They just didn't know anything. Yeah, excuse me, I am younger than they are, and I knew about that in the 50s and 60s. So, yeah, whatever. Anyway, so Bob and Marianne, those are Jan's parents, and Gail, that's Bee, the abuser, that's his wife, they all hung around together and everything. Nobody knew about anything except Bee. Bee's laughing at all of them. He didn't want any of them anyway. All he wanted was the 12-year-old Jan. So this was all done to get access to Jan. So at the time, Jan and her sister Karen had a bedroom in the basement of Bob and Marianne's home. Bee decided he was going to make a divider to go between the two beds so he would have access to Jan. So at that time, he also had sought the help of a therapist because he had raped a child, served a year in prison some years back. And the therapist told him that it would be a good idea for him to sleep next to a little girl. Not to have sex with her, wait till she goes to sleep and then just lay down with her and, sleep next to her, and that would help him. And Marianne and Bob willingly agreed. So they said, sure, yeah, you can do that. So he began sleeping 4 nights a week in the bed next to her for 6 months. Yeah. Once again, Bob and Marianne claimed to just have been, we're really gullible. We're really naive. We didn't know anything about child molesters at that time. Absolutely not. So he continued to sleep with Jan right up until he kidnapped her for the first time. Yeah, because he kidnapped her twice. Yeah. So during that time that he was sleeping with her and getting to know her, there were several other times that he had molested her as well. Once the kids were all sleeping on the trampoline that he had in his backyard. It was a summer night and all the kids were asleep. And Jan wakes up and her panties are around her ankles. And she looks over and Bob's sleeping next to her, or pretending to sleep next to her. She's like, what's going on? And he said, oh, you were so restless. They just must have worked their way down around your ankles. And, well, she's a little kid, so it's plausible to her. And then another time he took her on a boat trip. He had it was a couple. And they invited him to go out on the lake and he could bring somebody with him. They thought he was going to bring his wife. He brought Jan, and they thought this is really odd. Just some random little girl. Not his own kids, not his wife, just some random other child. And he was acting all creepy and romantic with her. And the man told his wife later, "Never, ever, ever again will I associate with Bob Berchtold." So, and then another time, Jan woke up in a motel room. She didn't know how she got there. She apparently had been drugged, and everything was, all the details were very fuzzy because she had been drugged. At the end of her ordeal, he had raped her over 200 times. Now, in October of 1974, Bob called Marianne one afternoon on a Thursday and asked to take Jan to go horseback riding when she got home from school. But now remember, he's carrying on this relationship with her, Marianne and Bob. These are Jan's parents. So Marianne says, "Oh, no, can we do it another day? I mean, she's got piano lessons today. It's a school night. It's just not good." He said, "I'll have her home before Bob gets home from work. So, I'll have her home before it's too late." She says, "Oh, okay, all right." So he picks her up, and then he gives her a pill that he says is an allergy pill because she's going to be around horses. So, of course, she passes out immediately, and she has no recollection of anything until she wakes up, and she's in and out of consciousness on her way to Mexico in Bob's RV, or his motorhome. Now, meanwhile, back at home, Marianne, her mother, is becoming a bit concerned, and Gail, B's wife, is too. So she comes over to the house, and, they wait. It's like 9 o'clock at night. It's 10 o'clock. Nothing. Not coming back. So then, Friday, same thing. Friday came and went. Saturday comes and goes. And Marianne decides, I don't know. He's been gone for like 3 or 4 days with her. Maybe we should call. So they decide to call the FBI. But what do you know? The office was closed. It was a weekend. So, she's like, oh, whatever. Now, the recording said call Butte, Montana if there's an emergency. But she thought, I'm not going to bother anybody in her own words, with this nonsense. It was no big deal. So Sunday, they decide they were going to call again. So they called the Idaho office, and someone was there and picked up. And the FBI agents, of course, came flying over and wanted to know all the details. And they had to actually convince them that their daughter had been kidnapped. Now, it had been 5 days. So they go, and Gail tells them that, oh, yeah, they do. They have a motorhome, an RV. So they go to the storage unit and see that it's missing. And they find B's station wagon along the road, and he had staged it as if they had been abducted. He broke the window out from the inside out and got a little blood on the glass. And they see the RV tire tracks and made it more than obvious that he had staged this abduction. So while they're driving down there, Bob's playing this cassette tape while Jan was kind of floating in and out of consciousness. And it was a creepy alien voice that he had recorded himself, and telling her that she was part alien and the fate of the entire world rested upon her shoulders. She was to have sex with B and bear children by the age of 16, as this alien planet that she was actually from was dying. Now, her mother had actually mated with an alien, and her father, Bob, wasn't her father at all. She really had an alien father. Now, if she didn't comply, the aliens were going to kill her entire family. They were going to kill her father, her sister Susan, her mother, and Karen would have to, Susan or Karen, one of the two girls, Susan would have to bear the child, and then she would vaporize. Bob convinced her that they were on their way to the horse ranch. She wakes up, she goes in the other room in the RV, and she sees Bob he's pretending to be asleep on the little couch thing. She wakes him up, Bob, what's going on? And so he says, oh, I don't know. He wakes up, oh, we were on our way to the horse ranch. I don't know what happened, but the aliens must have abducted us, and they're holding us against our will, and we've got to comply with what they asked. And he listened to the tape intently. He said, oh, yeah, well, then we're the alien companions, and, we have to have this baby. So Jan was sworn to secrecy about this mission. And so in order to mentally escape the sexual abuse, she would lay in the bed in the RV and look up at the little window overhead, and look at the leaves to try to mentally escape. He takes her, they're in Mexico, he takes her, she's 12, and he marries her because it's legal to marry in Mexico at 12 back then. In America too, in some states you could as well. Anyway, he calls her parents and he demands that they provide permission for him to bring her back as his wife because they were married. So the FBI contacted the Mexican police and her parents went down and brought her home. And the FBI gave the Brobergs, Marianne and Bob, Jan's parents, strict orders to have no contact whatsoever. I mean, no contact with the Berchtolds under any circumstances, period. Well, they did the exact opposite. Gail Berchtold came to their home one evening with a statement exonerating B from any crimes against Jan and stated that they actually had given their permission to take Jan on a vacation and they had their First Amendment rights to stand behind to keep this relationship secret. So what did they do? They signed that. Of course they signed that. Well, the FBI was furious and they took him to court anyway. But as they had no witnesses, they had to let him go. And he directly moves to Ogden, Utah, and begins selling cars. So one night, Jan's in bed, and she's awakened by that creepy tape recorder laying on her pillow next to her. And she looks up, and there's Bob. I'm not Bob. B. Now, her dad's name's Bob, and B's name is Bob too, so it gets confusing, but they call him B. So she wakes up, and B is in the room standing there, and he tells her, the mission is still on, you know, we've got to comply. You remember these aliens or what they're going to do. And I'll get some letters to you through your friends. And he did. So he was sending letters to her through her friends. Her friends would hand them to her at school. That continued. So he also was calling her mother. And he'd call her every day. He'd call Marion every day and he'd say how much he loved her. Oh, I love you and I want to be with you and just divorce your husband and come be with me. And her question to him was, why did you marry my daughter? Her 12-year-old daughter. She's jealous and wants to know, why did you marry her? And he says, you know, just meet me and I'll give you all the details. So, she did, and what do you think happened? Well, one thing led to another, and before you knew it, they were necking, as she says in her words, necking. And of course, they continued and resumed their sexual relationship for months. This goes on for months. She never tells Bob. B decides after he's got her ensnared enough that he's going to tell Bob himself. So he calls Bob on the phone and he tells him that he and Marianne are having this sexual relationship. And Bob is outraged, just outraged. Now, I don't know if he was outraged because B didn't reach out to him to resume their homosexual relationship, or if he really was outraged because, B's sleeping with his wife. I don't know. So Bob goes and seeks counseling with the Mormon bishop, and he is told to get a divorce, file for divorce. So he does. He files for a divorce, and he leaves with the girls, and Marianne is left, and she's just devastated. And B doesn't even want her. He's showing her no attention. So Bob and Marianne decide, you know what, let's just get back together. We both, love the girls. We love each other. And Bob says, I'm not gay. And so Marianne takes them back and they get together. They knew B was just really trying to divide and conquer to get access to Jan. So, that's what they do. Now, at this point, Jan is 13. And Bob and Marianne are back together. They've got the 3 girls. And B decides he's going to move away. And he does. He moves away and he buys a carnival. So he calls, gets a hold of Jan, and says that he wants Jan to come join him. And she's 13. And so what do you think happens? Her mom, Marianne, promptly goes out and buys her 13-year-old daughter a plane ticket and sends her off to go live with B. Of course, it's, normal. Who wouldn't do that? She wants to do that. Uh, Now, Bob was furious. He wasn't having it. He's like, you're going to get her back home right now. That's what you're going to do. But they wait 2 weeks to call the FBI to let them know that she's been kidnapped. Because she was kidnapped, uh, basically. So the FBI starts to monitor the calls at the home, and B calls Marianne every night, and she pretends that she knows nothing about it. Nothing about anything, and oh, uh, no, the FBI, they're not monitoring the calls and all of that. Well, that went on for 3 months. So finally, in November of 1976, they're able to trace the phone call to a service station across the street from the trailer park that Bob was living in. Not Bob, B. So they go there, and they see these poster size, um, kind of pornographic pictures of Jan in underwear and little short mini dresses all over his RV. They're all over the place. But there's no sign of Jan, so they don't know what to make of this. So they follow him, and they find out that he has enrolled Jan in a Catholic boarding school in Pasadena, California, under another name. Now, he said that he was a widower and also a CIA agent, and he had just gotten back from Lebanon. And if anybody comes and asks about Jan, don't give her name, because they're the bad people. So, of course, they rescue Jan, the FBI, and they bring her back home. And she is, at this point, really damaged emotionally and vacant of all emotion. She's sure that she's really in love with B. Well, the next morning, um, Bob's florist shop burns to the ground. And they knew that Burke Holt was behind it, but Jan really felt responsible, felt like it was her fault. What B did was he told two criminals if they burned down the florist shop, he would pay them $1,000 a month. So they did it. And they also, in doing that, they burned down the entire street, all the businesses. Jan continued to communicate with B off and on until 1976. But it started to kind of waver. She was getting a little bit older. Now, by the time she was 16, she didn't have that baby yet. And so she thought, oh my God, the aliens are they're gonna vaporize me and take Susan and kill my family and all of that. But when that didn't happen, and it was her 16th birthday, she thought, could this be some BS? Is this maybe not true? There are no aliens? And when her 16th birthday passed, she realized, yeah, there's no aliens. So she felt free, finally. It's crazy. So, like, all the pain, this entire family torn apart, the other kids were affected. Obviously, his children were affected. He sexually abused her. He raped her over 200 times. He served 1 year in jail in total. I don't know. Her parents failed her, obviously. Um, it might not have been their complete fault. I don't know. I mean, they gave him complete access to her, all to protect their own secrets. They put themselves before her. Her mother wrote a book, Stolen Innocence, and Berchtold would occasionally show up at speaking engagements that Jan had and that her mother had, and book signings. So Jan filed, and he would disrupt them. So Jan filed an order of protection. And so he ends up showing up at court, and he is defending himself, like any idiot. So he's forced to speak to her, and he ends up cross-examining her, and she got the better of him. So she had only requested a 3-month stalking injunction, but she ended up getting one for the entirety of his life. So later on, he goes against that, and he actually shows up with a gun to a gathering that she was attending. So they arrest him, and he has to appear in court the following week, but, he's not having that. So he ends up taking an entire bottle of his heart pills and commits suicide. So Jan forgives her parents, and she said her dad had the hardest time forgiving himself. She has a huge heart and capacity for forgiveness and love. I don't know. It's just weird. I don't like to judge other people. I'm not perfect, but I know one thing. There's no way on God's green earth that I would ever compromise the safety of my child or anybody's kid because I had some kind of secret to hide or anything like that. I mean, I don't know. I just think that the parents, they were culpable. I know she's forgiven them. It's, you know, it's her. She's the victim. She has the right to forgive whoever she wants. But I think we in society have some kind of obligation to kids and to victims to stand up for them when the people around them won't, especially children. So, um, I don't know. Let me know. Do you think that her parents should have served some time? Do you think that they should have been arrested, that anything should have happened to them? Would you have forgiven them if you were Jan? I mean, Jan's life has changed forever. You know, I don't know. But if you don't get a chance to watch it, you know, there's Stolen Innocence. That, of course, is the book that her mom wrote, and it's minus all these titillating details about the sexual relationships and all of that, and her father being either bisexual or homosexual. But if you get a chance to watch it, watch it. It's on Netflix. It's called Abducted in Plain Sight. It is the most bizarre thing ever. So feel free to leave your comments below and let me know what you think, if you agree with me or if you don't. Until next time, stay safe and thanks for watching.